Your brain is basically a prediction machine. It's working 24/7, constantly trying to figure out what's going to happen next. But how does it actually do that? Well, the secret might lie with a pretty familiar molecule, one that it turns out we've kind of misunderstood for years.
We've all heard dopamine called the pleasure molecule, right? But what if that's only like half the story? What if it's actually the brain's own internal navigation system, a kind of GPS that's constantly guiding us toward the future?
Okay, so to really get this, we need to wrap our heads around a key concept, reward prediction error, or RPE for short. It sounds a little technical, but it's a really powerful idea. Just imagine you expect to find $1 in your pocket, but instead you pull out a 20. That amazing feeling of positive surprise, that's a reward prediction error. It's the brain's way of saying, whoa, hey, pay attention to this.
So, for decades, the leading theory was that dopamine's main job was to signal this surprise with a really quick burst, a sudden spike of activity. You can think of it like a flashbulb going off inside your brain just to mark an unexpected event. It was simple, it was elegant, and for a really long time, it seemed to explain pretty much everything.
But you know how science works. It's all about poking holes in theories. And a new observation kind of threw a wrench in the works. Because in certain experiments, scientists started seeing something that just didn't fit that flashbulb model at all. What if the signal wasn't a sudden burst, but a slow, steady climb?
And this is the core of the puzzle. These studies started revealing that as an animal, or a person for that matter, gets physically closer to a reward they already know is there, a reward that is 100% expected, their dopamine levels don't spike. They ramp. They just slowly and steadily increase. And this was a huge challenge to that old surprise signal theory.
Okay, so let's put these two ideas side by side, just to be clear. On one hand, you have the classic spike theory, which says dopamine is all about surprise, the unexpected. But on the other hand, you have this new ramp observation, which shows dopamine signaling the rising value of a reward that's completely expected and getting closer. So, how can both of these be true? What's going on here?
The clue to solving this whole mystery, it turns out, wasn't about the chemical itself. It was about the map the brain uses to understand the world. The answer wasn't in the signal, but in how the brain was actually drawing its own reality. So to crack this code, scientists turned to something called temporal difference learning models, or TD models. Now, don't let the name freak you out. Just think of them as these super powerful computer simulations that act like a virtual brain. They let researchers test out all these different coding strategies to see which one actually matches up with what happens in a real brain. And what these models showed was just, wow! It was incredible. They could perfectly replicate that dopamine ramp, but only if one very specific condition was met. It all came down to the way the model represented the distance to a goal. The shape of the brain's internal map was literally everything. So the first logical guess, the one that makes the most sense to us, was a simple linear map. Like a ruler. Each step you take closer to the goal adds the same amount of value. Step 1 is worth 1 point, step 2 is worth 2, and so on. Makes total sense, right? But when they plugged this map into the TD model, it didn't work. It just couldn't produce the ramp. So, what did work? A curved map, a nonlinear one. On this kind of map, the value doesn't just increase steadily, it accelerates. The first few steps you take toward a goal, they're worth a little bit. But those last few steps right before you get there, they're worth a whole lot more. The closer you get, the more valuable each and every step becomes. And this special curved map actually has a scientific name. It's called a quadratic transformation. Yep, it sounds pretty complex, but it's just a specific mathematical way of saying that value speeds up as you get closer. And when the researchers programmed this curve into their models, bingo, it predicted a perfectly steady linear dopamine ramp, exactly what they were seeing in real brains. Okay, let's put it all together in a few quick steps. First, your brain is tracking how far you are from a goal. Second, it applies that special quadratic curve, which kind of warps its perception of value. Third, this new warped representation creates an internal signal that just ramps up as you get closer. And finally, that rising signal is what drives the dopamine ramp we can actually measure. It's just this beautiful, elegant solution that connects the brain's internal map to a real chemical signal. So here's the really crucial point. Dopamine is so much more than just a simple surprise signal. It's this incredibly sophisticated system that tracks the value of rewards that are far away. guiding our behavior over long stretches of time and keeping us motivated while we move toward a goal.
So, let's pull back and look at the big picture here. This dopamine ramp isn't just for surprises. It's a full-on guidance system for the future. By signaling the growing value of a distant goal, it fuels our motivation, it keeps us moving forward, even when that finish line feels really far away. It's what turns our brain from a simple reactor into a powerful, forward-looking prediction machine.
And that leaves us with one last thought. This isn't just happening in some lab animal or a computer model. It's happening inside your head, right now. Your brain is constantly running these calculations, creating these value maps for your future. So, take a second and ask yourself, what goal is your dopamine ramping for?